One of the things I've noticed coming to South Central Pennsylvania only 10 years ago is that we do still remember. We do still know, because we do have a lot of families that still live in this area. We don't migrate and move in overwhelming numbers in the same way that some of the other larger cities that were part of different urban migrations. So when I first moved to this part of the country, I actually thought the riots had just happened, because the stories, when people would talk about them, were so immediate. And when folks would go through the streets, there's still the park that there used to be a neighborhood of Black folks who were related to the person who was considered a Black man that pulled the trigger. And that whole neighborhood was seized by eminent domain and razed. So there was a whole group of African American families who lost their wealth, who lost their homes, who felt, whether it was true or not, felt that that happened in retaliation. And those families are still there. Their children and their grandchildren are still there, and they were raised on these stories of when the police sent the dogs to us, when our money was taken from us, when our homes were taken from us, when we tried to speak up, but police and military vehicles and men with guns were sent into the city like we were mass criminals and dogs, when all we were doing was trying to speak up and be heard. And so the people who have these memories have passed them on to their descendants who still drive past those same street corners. Those streets are there. Newberry Street is still there, and it's still an all-white street in an all-Black neighborhood, surrounded by Black people who look at this 2-block stretch of beautiful, manicured, white-owned homes and know that that was where violence came from a couple of generations ago. This is still real for us in downtown York City. It hasn't gone away. And so when we see these events still happening in the news, when we see issues of racism popping up, it's not just hitting us in our 2019 heart. It's still ricocheting through our families, because it's been a pain that hasn't been resolved, and that we're still actively suffering economically, academically from 50 years later.
One of the issues that Carla brought up, and I'd like to get some response, is that we're still dealing with the aftermath of 69. Well, the aftermath of forever, but whatever happened in this period has had residual repercussions, that there are families that are still suffering, and there are people who may have benefited by what happened, from what I hear. Do you have a sense that you still feel some repercussions from this?
I believe, yes, that we're still feeling the pain, not just from 69, but as you spoke of, from centuries of abuse and mistreatment of brown and Black people. I think it's now becoming a genetic thing. It's been happening so long. The fear factor was embedded in a lot of our children, a lot of our ancestors, which is getting passed down for generations to come. At some point, I think the young lady is correct that the powder keg will blow up, especially with today's generation. I don't think that we're doing enough as a community, as the human race, to address these issues that still exist today. And I think that this is a great way to start it. I know you had panel discussions before, but to actually take ownership in some of the things that took place, we have to take the onus, those of us that played a part in some of these things. And still today, I think the racism is alive, not so much overtly. I think it's covert, systematic, with laws. Blocking the economics of the education is poor in our schools, and I think our children are our best investment to help change and bring change to the next generations to come. So we need to take heed of what happened in 69, because if we don't, it'll happen again.
Well, let's stop right here, because one of the questions, the whole reason to look back, is to try to figure out how not to have history repeat itself, right? That's the whole reason for going back. How do we learn lessons for what happened then so that we don't see someone dying over racial tensions today or tomorrow. So let's examine this for a minute. What is still bad? When you say racial tension, there's still racism today. How do you see it manifest?
Well, again, it's a lot of it is covertly. You really can't see it if we just think about history, when the civil rights era, and you look a lot of people. She said, as the young lady said, that we migrated to the north. There was a lot of physical abuse in the South, where you can see people hanged from trees and burned and houses firebombed and things of that nature. So a lot of people came to the north and thought that it was a little better because it wasn't so much on the surface. It still was covertly done systematically. If we look at to give you a solution, I think educating one another, again, having these conversations and letting each other know our sentiments on these issues, because I think we all have a right to this planet. It belongs to no one. I think it belongs to everyone here. And for it to be divided the way that it's been divided, and it's continuing to do so because of greed, we're going to have problems for a long time unless we deal with some of those issues.